Well, ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to Bull City Coordinators. We are hopping a little bit into the Wayback Machine here. Some of you older fans who listen, I'm sure, remember the person we're about to speak with. Some of you younger fans probably not, but I'm very excited about this interview for a number of reasons. One of which may be that this player was at Duke when I was finishing up high school and starting college, and we also share the same first name, so I may be a little biased here. But would you please introduce yourself to the audience, please, sir?
Yes, my name is Ben Erdeljac, and I was a Duke student athlete, football player from 1997 to 2001.
Now, as I mentioned to you before we got started, the first question that you're going to have to answer is, as I was going back through some old game tape, I saw a very talented tight end that was in Durham for a season with you guys. Went on to have a very productive and long career in the NFL. How did you all let Ben Watson get out of Durham and go down to Georgia?
I think the answer to that is I have no idea. It is, Ben, interestingly, I was sitting around last weekend watching Super Bowl pregame, and I saw him interviewed on the NFL Network, and I sent him a text after that, told him, I saw him and that he was still doing good things, and he responded quickly. Benjamin Watson is a fantastic person. I have two sons, 9 and 7 years old, and my son Luke is like a huge Duke football fan. And if we get into that later, I can tell you some stories. But I told him, I said, Luke, I played with him at Duke. He said, nah. I said, yeah, he played at Duke, and then he transferred to Georgia. But I reached out to Ben. He's doing well. He's a great guy. And I told my son Luke, I said, if there's an athlete that you would want to be as your role model, it would be somebody like Benjamin Watson.
First off, was Watson a Goldsmith recruit, or was he a Carl Franks recruit?
You know what? That is a great question. I can't say for certain whether he was a Goldsmith or a Franks recruit. He was there. Let's see. Was he there in '99?
He was there, I think.
I want to say
it was whatever Franks' first year was, which, I think would have been 99.
Right. Yeah. So that was Franks' first year. You're right on that. I don't know if I assume Ben was being recruited prior to 1999, which may have made him a Goldsmith recruit. I really can't say for sure, and I don't remember which position coach recruited him, because as you probably know, different position coaches recruit different regions of the country. And so I really am not sure on that.
Tell us why it is that you say he is an excellent role model for probably not just your son, but you referenced your son specifically. Why would you hold out Watson as a role model for people?
He's very down to earth. He is a compassionate human being. I've seen many of his interviews and even things that he's posted on social media over the past few years, and his remarks are always very thoughtful, and all of that. And what I know about him from the short time that we were teammates, and the very few interactions that we've had since then, I just think very highly of him.
Do you stay in touch with a lot of your former teammates from your time in Durham?
Absolutely. Looking back on my years at Duke, we did not win as many games as any of us would have liked to, and I'm sure you and I will talk a little bit about that. But I have no regrets on my experience at Duke, and I am so thankful and proud of the experience that I had there. And at the top of the list is the friends that I made. I have lifelong friends that we keep in touch, mostly now through social media and texting, just because it's so easy. but, I'll talk to him on a phone. The best man in my wedding, Todd DeLamoyer, we still talk weekly. He has tried to have like a guys' weekend once a year for the past few years. And unfortunately, depending on people's schedules, they can or cannot make it. But we always look forward to trying to get together. One of the best recent memories with my Duke buddies and Duke football is 3 years ago for the home UNC game where Duke beat UNC. That was my 40th birthday, along with my freshman roommate, Devin Pierce, his 40th birthday. So the day of the game was my birthday. The day before that was his birthday. And a large group of guys that I played with went back for that game. And it was so much fun. I mean, I got to bring my family, and that was the first time my boys had been to a Duke football game. So that was special in that regard. But we enjoyed the game. They won. They beat UNC. And then afterwards, this is a great story. We went to a local pizza place in downtown Durham, and we had reserved the back room for our big party. And we get there, and who is in the back room but UNC fans? And so they had to kick the UNC fans out to let us in. And it was, it was fine. The UNC fans were finishing up there like, hey, good game today. They had gone to the game. We said it was a great game. And so, it was very cordial, but, a little bit of extra pleasure in that.
I love it. Was that the 2018 year where Jones ran all over the field?
Yes, it was.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, I was at that game too. My crew that would get together, we try to go to one game a year. We were at that game. That was a heck of a game. That was one of the most amazing things I had ever seen on a Duke football field.
Yeah, that was a lot of fun to watch the game. And for me personally, it was the first home game that I had gone to in like 16 years, because when I graduated, I became a high school math teacher and a football coach and a track coach. And so for years, I was coaching in the fall, and so I didn't have the opportunities to go back to games. Then my wife and I had kids, and things got busy, so I was always tied to the TV when they were on. But to go back and see a game in person was extra special. And we showed up a couple days early, and one of my other former teammates, Troy Austin, who is now a senior associate athletic director at Duke, he kind of showed us around the facilities the Friday before the game. I got to see Hap Zarzor, who was the trainer when I was there. I got to see some other former strength and conditioning coaches, got to see the upgrade in the facility since I've been there. It was a fantastic 40th birthday present.
Well, that's great. And, I'm a trial attorney, and I always have a plan for when I go in to ask my questions in court. And sometimes the way it develops goes completely different, and you just got to jump in and swim, which is kind of what we're doing now. But so I'm going to go a little bit off my organized script and just keep with the narrative flow here. I just want to ask you about the change in the facilities from the time that you were there to what they have now. What was the big difference or series of big differences that you noticed when you went around there in 2018?
Yeah. Can you say it's like night and day?
Go ahead. Go ahead. And we're going to talk about why we think that is later, but go ahead.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, let's step back and look at college athletics as a whole, and then narrow into college football, and then narrow into Duke. College athletic facilities have blown up in the past 10 years. And I think that may have started back during the time that I was recruited and played. I remember, maybe it was shortly after I played, seeing on TV, it was probably, I think it was an NC State game, and they were talking about NC State improving their facilities and how nice their facilities were. And nowadays, you pull up YouTube and you can basically tour almost any college athletic facilities you want to, just type in the name of the school. And I mean, some of these facilities are phenomenal. And Duke has made huge strides since I was there. We had the Murray building as our football building when I was there. And we had the weight room and the training room and the locker rooms. And it was what it was. And when I went to Duke, there was talk of improving the facilities. Well, it wasn't until the year after I left that they broke ground on the Yo building, which is the current football building. And the Yo building, I mean, it's more than a significant upgrade than the Murray building was. But even to go through the Murray building in 2018 and see how they've transformed that for some of the other Olympic sports is phenomenal. So, I mean, Duke has I think over the years recognized the importance of facilities in having a first-rate athletic program.
Okay, and let me go back a little bit to kind of how I wanted to do this, although this is very fascinating to me, especially for folks who are watching and observing the program at a distance like I am. But I want to get into a little bit about how you got to Durham and how you settled on football. My research getting ready for this, it seemed like you played a number of different sports in high school. One, tell us where you're from, what other sports you played, and then how you settled on football.
Sure. So I grew up in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, and that's currently where I live back home. I went to a small single-A school, Riverview High School, and I played football, basketball, baseball, and I ran track. And that's one of the great benefits of being at a small school is, you have so many things that you can get involved with. Nowadays, a lot of high school kids specialize in one or maybe two sports. Well, during high school, I played 4 sports. And I was in the school play, and I was in all the clubs. It was just a great high school experience at Riverview. And my first love was basketball, actually. I played basketball since I was very young. I was a huge Duke basketball fan. I certainly kind of grew up with the teams in the 90s. Grant Hill was probably, one of my most favorite players growing up. And I was a good basketball player, but I didn't have the opportunities in basketball that I ended up having in football. So I started to be pretty heavily recruited my junior year. And basically when it all shook out, it came down to, do I stay home and go to Pitt or do I go to Northwestern or Duke? And so those were my 3 kind of top choices out of the schools that were recruiting me. And the summer before my senior year of high school, my dad said to me, Ben, football aside, what is the school that you would want to go to? And I said, Duke. And he said, let's get in the car. We're driving down to Duke. So this is the middle of the summer. And it's kind of funny because me being sort of the homeboy and coming from a place where I had friends and all that stuff, I didn't want to waste the summer weekend and go travel down to Duke and walk around a college campus. But my dad said, no, this is something that we need to do. So we drove down to Duke, not being familiar at all with the campus, the East and the West campus, the Duke Forest. I mean, we drove in. It was a gray, rainy day, and I think we came in through like the back door through the Duke Forest, and we're like, where is this place? And then all of a sudden, we sort of drive up to West Campus, and we just kind of got out of the car and started walking around. We found the Murray building, and at this time, the summer before, I think it was my senior year, Duke definitely was recruiting me, but it wasn't like they were calling me day after day or anything like that. And so So we walk into the Murray building and into the training room. And that's the first time I met Hap Zarzor, who was my trainer and still the trainer there today. And we talked to Hap. And, my dad did most of the talking. He says, yeah, Ben's gotten some letters from Duke. They recruit him, things like that. And we talked to Hap for a while. And then Hap says, well, why don't you go walk around? And, the locker room's downstairs. And so we checked that out. Well, from what Hap has told me and my parents over the years is when we walked out of the training room, he goes upstairs to the coach's offices and maybe talk to Coach Goldsmith. And Coach Goldsmith says, who's here? We really want that kid. And so
was he? Who was recruiting you primarily?
So Scott Brown was the defensive line coach, and he recruited me. And what happened was, I may have the years wrong. This may have been the summer before my junior year. We're talking 24, 25 years ago now. But basically, after that visit, Duke became much more aggressive in recruiting me, and I obviously ended up attending there.
Did you? It looked to me like you came in maybe as a running back, per what I pulled up on your stats on the internet. What position did you play in high school, and what did you start out playing when you came to Duke?
Sure. So in high school, we ran the wing T. So it's, let's put it this way. There was basically one receiver on our team, and it was me. And it was when I wasn't in the backfield. And so I was a running back. I would carry the ball. I would block. They would flank me out as a receiver. And when I came to Duke, they recruited me as an H-back, which was sort of this hybrid position. And quite honestly, they would say, yeah, we want you to be an H-back. And I had no clue what they were talking about. But my sense was it was similar to what I had done in high school, meaning that I could have sort of multiple responsibilities on the field. But I remember freshman practice, they had me in the backfield with Dwayne Epperson, who was also came in with my class and was an excellent tailback. And Dwayne, he told me years later, he said, I was like, who is this guy? What is he doing in the backfield? And I said, Dwayne, I was just doing what they told me. But very quickly, they moved me out to receiver, and that's where I made my home, I guess.
Was that a size issue, like, height, weight? What caused them to move you from running back to wide receiver?
I don't know. That would be a question for the coaches at the time. I really don't know. It may have been based on need, based on depth. I don't think that I honestly don't know. I'd be guessing.
Well, it worked out pretty well. I mean, you were a good wide receiver at Duke, and you put up some good numbers, and you were a fun player to watch. So I think they made the right call. Going back a little bit, a little scattered on. I want to make sure I cover everything here. So the first visit, you and your dad go. You meet the strength and conditioning coach. Do you meet any of the other coaches on staff at that point?
Yeah, so back to that story, Hap Zarzor, he says, why don't you take a look around? So we head down to the locker room, which is down a flight of steps from the training room. And that is where I met Todd DeLaMoliere, who, as I previously said, was the best man in my wedding and still, one of my best friends today. So my dad and I walked through the locker room, and Todd and his dad, Joe DeLaMoliere, who was a coach on the staff, they walk in sort of the other end of the locker room. And it was like looking in a mirror, seeing Todd and myself and his dad and my dad. And I honestly think that was a big moment for me, knowing that Duke was a fit for me, is because I saw Todd, and later whenever I took my official recruiting trip to Duke, Todd and I hung out all weekend. Everybody hung out, but Todd and I kind of hung close together. And it became very clear to me that Todd and I had the same desire to be part of a group that reestablished Duke football. Now, we didn't fulfill that goal, which is something you and I can talk more about. Obviously, we didn't win the games that we had hoped to. But at the beginning there's no doubt, like, that the DeLongleers, Todd, his dad, his entire family were a big reason that I came to Duke. Scott Brown, who recruited me, was a great recruiter and a great person and a big reason that I went to Duke. And Coach Goldsmith. Coach Goldsmith, to me, was he sort of epitomized the head coach. I didn't have a lot of interaction with him until he and Coach Brown came to my home towards the end of the recruiting process. And this was another big selling point for me. My mom actually made dinner for everybody, and we sat down in our dining room and had dinner. And I remember just being aware of how comfortable Coach Goldsmith was. I think at one point he opened a newspaper and was reading the newspaper. And I thought, you know what, this guy's pretty cool. He's very calm here. He's getting along well with the family. He wants me to be part of the Duke family. And so all of those things kind of came together, and I chose Duke.
Well, let's I would be remiss if we didn't mention this. You probably, some of the listening audience may not know who Joe DeLongleer is. Could you just educate our audience, for those who don't know, on who exactly he is and his long storied history in football?
Sure. So I'm gonna do Todd a favor here, and I'm gonna introduce his dad. Joe DeLongleer is Todd DeLongleer's dad. But now, what you also need to know is he's an NFL Hall of Famer. He played for the Buffalo Bills. He blocked for O.J. Simpson. He played for the Cleveland Browns, the Electric Company, and he had a great NFL career. He was inducted into the NFL. I'm not going to get the year right, but I'm going to guess it was 2004, maybe 2005, something, or 2003.
It is 2003. You've got it.
2003. Okay, yeah. And here's another great story. You ask about how much I see my former teammates. So when Joe DeLongleer was inducted into the Hall of Fame, that same weekend, one of our teammates, Brad Santana, married his wife, who was a Duke cheerleader. So Brad's wedding was in Hershey, Pennsylvania. The NFL Hall of Fame induction was in Canton, Ohio. We go to the wedding. We live it up, celebrating Brad's wedding, and we drive overnight to get to the induction ceremony. My buddies and I are sitting in the front row, let's say, falling asleep during the entire induction ceremony until Joe DeLongleer gets up there and gives his speech. We were on the edge of our seats at that point. And he gave one of the best Hall of Fame speeches that I've ever heard. So, yeah, there's another great story. So that's who Joe DeLongleer is.
Well, that's great. And let me turn now a little bit to your time at Duke. You came in 1997, is that right?
Yep.
All right, so you were there your first season, 2-9, no conference wins, but 98, you're 4-7, 2 conference wins, and you guys had a couple of plays go differently. Very easily could have ended that season with 6 wins. Okay, and then Coach Goldsmith is let go by the then athletic director Joe Oliva. I want to just ask you guys. Just ask you from your perspective how you guys handled the fact that there was a coaching change. I mean, what is that like when the guy who recruits you and is part of the reason you came to Duke is gone and then a new person is coming in? How did the team handle that?
Yeah, I think in some ways you handle it in multiple ways. like, for example, we are 19-year-old kids at that point, and we're kind of just doing what we're told to do to some regard. We're doing what we think we're supposed to be doing. There was a short period of time there where there was some uncertainty, but we continued to, train, and we continued to have our own ambitions and our goals with regards to football. And then, I think that in a lot of ways you just keep going with the plan that is in place, even though there's no leader for a short period of time there during the transition. I think that everybody was focused on improving, and if that meant that the athletic department saw the best way to improve was by making a change, then we didn't really know any better. So, we went along with that. Coach Franks coached under Steve Spurrier. They seem to be bringing him in with a reputation for having a bit of a different offense. He was younger, and so, again, as young 19-year-olds, you kind of have the idea that, you might be able to relate to a younger coach differently than to another coach. And so I think at the time, we were looking forward to a change because we didn't really know any better, and we all wanted to improve.
It seemed like from some of the news articles I read, there were some quotes from some of the players that indicated that maybe they felt a little bit of disappointment that they let Goldsmith down. You said you processed it in a couple of different ways. Was that going through your collective heads at all? Like, man, if only we'd done a couple of things differently, maybe we don't go through this change. Was that part of the adjustment process?
I'm not sure. I don't, 20-some years later, as I sit here, I don't know that sticks out in my mind personally. Certainly, you do learn pretty quickly at the college level as a player that your actions and your performance do impact a person's livelihood and their family's livelihood. And so it's certainly reasonable to consider, how we perform impacts what happens at the coaching level. But again, for me and for guys in my class at that time, I think for the most part, we were probably focused on how do we get better as a team, and if this is a way to get better, then this is the route that we're going to go.
So Coach Franks comes in, and I'm just kind of curious, what was – obviously there were a lot of things different between the two about the offense they ran, I'm sure about their approach to things, but I'm just kind of interested more on a very micro level as far as how the two coaches maybe related to the players. What was the biggest difference between the two? And that's not meant in a negative way, but I imagine there was some sort of adjustment period and getting used to one another. What did you notice was different between the two of them as head coaches?
Yeah, so the biggest difference that I recall is that Coach Franks was the play caller. He was the offensive coordinator, not by title, but by choice. Coach Goldsmith was more of a head coach that oversaw everything that was happening and would make the in-game decisions, whereas Coach Franks was, very instrumental in making the game plan. He was instrumental in making the play calls. He was instrumental in the substitutions of personnel, as well as the in-game big decisions. Do you go on fourth down? Do you punt? Do you onside kick? When you call timeouts? All that kind of stuff. So that was the biggest thing. I think that, I remember practices under Coach Goldsmith where, I don't want to minimize his role by any means, but he was making sure the periods were changing and he was observing a little more big picture, whereas Coach Franks during practice was instructing and calling the plays. And so that was a big difference in terms of the two head coaches.
Okay, that's interesting. I guess a way you could analogize it is one is more at a 30,000 foot view level, and the other's right down on the floor.
Sure, and it's interesting you say that because Coach Goldsmith sometimes would go up into a box and watch practice from above, and Coach Franks is always on the field. So that's an interesting analogy.
So you were there. Did you play the '98 season? It looked like from the stats I was able to pull up, you were out for that year.
Correct. So I had a little bit of a knee injury for the '98 season, and it wasn't a like an ACL tear or anything like that. I got to experience that a year later in '99. But the injury that kept me out in 1998 was more of a the underside of your kneecap has some cartilage on it, and I tore some of that cartilage, and so I would experience some very sharp pain in specific ranges of motion, and it took a while for me to adapt to that, and so Coach Goldsmith made the decision to redshirt me at my second year in 1998 after having played a bit as a freshman in 1997. And so I traveled with the team. I actually was in the press box for every game. And that was an interesting experience because I got to view the game more from a coach's perspective. I always appreciated Coach Goldsmith for allowing me to do that. It wasn't something that I requested, so it must have been something that he felt could be useful to me and to the team. And then in 1999, I got back onto the field.
Now, so you were by that point in '99 playing wide receiver, is that right?
Yes.
So tell us, you mentioned the ACL tear. Tell us when that happened, what the recovery process was like, and how you came back from it.
Yeah, so that was my redshirt sophomore season in 1999, and I was just starting to come into my own, I think, as a wide receiver. I was starting to gain confidence. I was starting to see significant playing time. Scotty Montgomery was sort of our leader as a receiver.
He was okay. Yeah, he had some moments. He was all right.
Yeah, right.
Well, you had Richmond Flowers, too. I mean, Montgomery, of course, was, great, but Flowers was really good, too.
Yeah. Richmond was sort of our number two, and I think I was our number three. And
there's no shame in taking the bronze behind those two, especially behind Scotty. I mean, he was so good.
Yeah, absolutely. And there was even some times in that 1999 season where I started instead of Richmond, which, as I said, I felt like I was starting to come into my own. And so we were playing Clemson in Death Valley, and I caught a drag route, and I ran right into the middle linebacker, and he kind of slowed me up. Well, the safety, they were in a defense where the safety was coming down, and he had me coming across the middle. And so I bump into the middle linebacker, and you see that safety freeze for a second. Then I continue on my drag route, and the safety comes down hard. So I catch this drag route, and I've thought about this play so many times over 20 years. But I catch the ball, and the confidence that I was developing made me think, I'm going to break this tackle and go down the sideline. Well, he kind of grabbed me high around the shoulder pads, and as I planted my foot in the ground and he twisted me, it was like cracking your knuckles. It was like pop, 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 and I was just down. Yeah, it was at the time. It was the injury that every player never wants to happen.
You said this was the '99 season?
Right, yeah.
I remember listening to that game at home. I can't remember if I mentioned this before, but I'm from Central South Carolina, so right outside of Clemson. Grew up there.
Okay.
And I remember listening to that very game on the radio. While you were mentioning that game, I said, my memory of that is pain. not the pain you felt, but I pulled up the score. I won't mention it, but it fit in my mind. I mean, there was a lot of quarterback uncertainty then between, you had Campbell and Romine, and I think maybe Dapolito was there then. There were a lot of guys going back and forth. There was a lot of uncertainty. There was a lot of just lack of consistency, I guess. And you were there for 5 total seasons. 99, you were 3-8. In the last 2 years you were there, you guys went 0-11. I imagine that was very difficult for you all as players, especially given what you and Todd and some of those other guys wanted to do while you were at Duke. And nobody likes to play a game to lose, obviously. But how did you guys handle that as a team, as individuals, and how did the coaching staff work to try to keep you all positive and upbeat through that time?
Right. So you're referring to the 2 0-11 seasons during that time?
Right.
Yeah. So again, so this fall will be 20 years since that 2001 season. And over those 20 years, those 2 seasons have probably motivated me more in every aspect of my life than any other thing I've ever experienced. Because of the goals going and the reasons for going to Duke and not reaching those goals. But looking back to answer your question, the thing that I am most proud of for my time at Duke was the commitment and the perseverance and the never quit attitude that I exhibited, but also that all of my teammates and coaches exhibited. It was tough. It was really, really tough. It was really tough to come out for the start of a home game and see an empty stadium every Saturday. It was really tough to lose close games, and it was even tougher to get blown out. But we showed up every day for practice. We prepared every day for the next game. And as I said, that is probably the greatest thing that I learned during my time at Duke was how to handle that adversity and continue, I'll use this word, to continue to succeed. Now, we didn't succeed in terms of winning games, which still to this day hurts me just to say that, but I think every individual still succeeded in life, if that makes sense.
No, it does. And, you and I talked about this when we first spoke about setting up this interview. It's funny what sticks in your head over time. I, as a trial attorney, remember the things I did wrong more than the things that I did well. I could put a big verdict or a great deposition behind me and never think about it again. But, the things I don't object to at trial, or the time I opened a door during a deposition and regretted it, or, a judge got ticked off at me because I wasn't explaining my point correctly and, he misunderstood what I was saying. He or she didn't really get what I was trying to convey. Those things stick with you. I think if you have some level of a competitive drive going, those are the things that stay in your head more than the winning. Do you think that's true?
Absolutely. I mean, I could name you probably 6 or 7 plays that I could replay in my mind right now where I could have or should have gone up for a pass in a different way, or I could have or should have cut right instead of cut left, or I could have or should have, absolutely. There's no doubt. And I think that's human nature, right? I mean, I'm listening to, again, the Super Bowl pregame, and Tony Gonzalez is talking about, how he remembers from plays from when he played. And, And so, absolutely, I think any of us that have that intrinsic motivation and always want to find improvement any way we can, we are going to, unfortunately, to some degree, dwell on the what ifs. But hopefully we do it in a way that has a healthy perspective that only makes us better and doesn't engulf us, right?
No, I agree. And, one thing that you mentioned about showing up every day, and I want to tie this back to when I was listening to that Clemson game where you got injured on the radio at home.
Mm-hmm.
We as fans have no outcome on the game. Now, obviously, my buddy Tim and I, back when we could get together before the pandemic hit, we took a lot of great pride in our beer selection to try to make sure we got the right beer so the team could win, right?
Yeah, right.
Which is why we banned Modelo for a while, because we were drinking it during the Miami game in 2015, which we won't go into again here. But we don't have any way to influence the game, and hearing you talk about how you guys would show up every day and how the coaching staff would have to just power through this, I think it's helpful for us to hear, although it's obviously 20 years after the fact, but we can think about that today as the last couple of seasons for Duke have not been so great, about how you just got to find a way to power through it and hope that things will go right when they show up on Saturday. So I appreciate you saying that. Yeah, I don't know if you kind of indicated that you were okay talking about this, so I'll just go ahead and ask you. When you said that you all wish that you had won more games, what do you think kept that from happening? Was it a talent level issue? Was it just the conference was changing and Duke was a little bit lagging behind? Was it just nobody was there who really knew how to teach you guys the things that needed to be done to close out games? What do you think was behind most of that?
Right. So again, this fall will be 20 years, and I've thought about this for 20 years and have rehashed it with teammates and what's different between, Duke teams now and our Duke team then. So yeah, you give this stuff a lot of thought. And here's kind of where I think I come to in the end. Think about how many different variables go into winning a football game and having a winning football program. You maybe talk about things. Well, first of all, how's the ball going to bounce, right? Is the football going to bounce our way on that key play in the fourth quarter, or is it going to bounce the other team's way? Something as kind of trivial as that. Are we going to make the right play call in that moment? Are we going to go for it on fourth down or punt it? Are we going to, all those in-game sorts of things? Are we going to recruit the right players? Are we going to recruit a 6'1" white kid from Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania to play receiver? Or are we going to recruit, somebody else that has better skills? And I guess I'm trying to take some responsibility for my own performance in those years as well. Are we going to improve the facilities to attract recruits? Are we going to what's our in-game experience going to be like for our fans, to draw fans into the stadium? And I think, to come back and answer your question, I don't know that there's a single thing that prevented us from winning. I think that during my years at Duke, we failed to create a winning culture. And there are a lot of reasons that go into that. Are you still there, Ben?
Yeah, you cut out for a second. You had said there were a lot of reasons that go into that.
Yeah, and so that's kind of where I'll leave it. I think that over the years, talking with teammates, we talk about more specifics, but I think a lot of those specifics that we talk about are our own perceptions and our own perspective. And when you're a player, like I'll just speak for myself, my goal every day in practice was to be the best player I could be. My goal every Saturday was to do my job to help my team. And I just tried to control the things that I could control. And so I hope that every coach during my time there, and every player during my time there, and every athletic administrator during my time there had those same goals too. And maybe certain decisions could have been different and would have resulted in different outcome, or maybe not. I can't say.
Yeah, and you and I talked a little bit about this previously, and I want to kind of convey this here. Doing the blog that I've been doing and interviewing the players and the one coach associated with the program has given me a lot of time to think about this. And I mentioned to you how I got a copy of Coach Goldsmith's book and read it. And here's kind of where I've come down on this, okay? The Goldsmith era up through the end of the Roof era and then the start of the Cutcliffe era, there was a lot of losing, okay? And really, that isn't that different from what Duke had been experiencing pretty much since Coach Murray retired in 1965. There were some good seasons, but there were only, I think, 2 bowl games after that. Spurrier's tenure was great, but even that season where they were co-ACC champions, they started out 1-3 in the game against Clemson where they turned it around. The quarterback, Billy Ray, threw 5 interceptions. 2 of them were immediately turned back over, but I bring this up to just say things could have easily gone in different directions. But I think that what was going on at the school, in the conference, in the sport of college football at the time was everything was changing, right? And I don't think that the athletic department didn't support the football program. I think that they had the wrong idea about what it would take to win at Duke in this new era, which was primarily we'll just get in a new coach and everything will be okay. You know, they got rid of Coach Wilson when Spurrier was the offensive coordinator, and he had back-to-back 6 and 5 seasons, right? And they didn't do better when they got rid of him, and then Spurrier comes in later and he does, just fantastic, and then he leaves. They regress under Coach Wilson. Goldsmith comes in, has that great first season, and I think that maybe validated some of the thought process, which was, all we need is the right coach, But as you mentioned earlier, the facilities today compared to then are night and day. The track's gone around the stadium. There's more seats there, right? The game day experience is better, right? The press boxes are better. The financial commitment to the coaching staff has gone up. So I think you guys were the sacrificial lambs, that those eras of teams were just the sacrificial lambs, I think, to make Duke realize how much had changed in college football, how much had changed in the conference, and what was needed to win. And kind of where I've come down on it is by the time we get Cutcliffe in as the head coach, I think the school had finally realized that, hey, we're still trying to run a program, use Betamaxes, where everybody else has finally gone over to DVDs. Okay?
Yeah.
So I just think the more I look back on it, I think that the athletic department, for whatever reason, it's not that they weren't supportive. It's just they didn't know what the right support was that needed to be given to the football program. And it took, unfortunately, you guys going through what you went through to make them realize that. Do you have any comments on that?
I think that those are valid points. I can't speak specifically to decisions made by athletic directors or athletic administration or things like that. But even as you and I spoke leading up to this, a year or two after my time at Duke, there was a gathering of football alumni in Durham, and there were serious discussions about what needed to change to have a winning football program. And there were, my understanding, I mean, at the time I was like 23 or 24, so I didn't have any money to get to the program. But my understanding was that there were some pretty big donors there saying, hey, things need to change. We need to figure out what those things are. And my understanding is that over the years, Duke has done a much better job of let's say, enhancing those things: facilities, in-game experience, coaches' pay, the things that you just mentioned. And you see, let's throw it out there. You see schools like Stanford. You see schools, obviously Notre Dame. They have the football tradition to build on. But you see Northwestern. These academic schools that are successful, and now you see Duke being successful. So it can be done. It might be a little more challenging at these academic institutions than some of the others, but even as a player when I was there, people would say that, and in the back of my mind, I'd be like, come on, I don't want like an easy excuse here. I went to a great academic school because I wanted to, and I went to a Division I football program in the ACC because I wanted to play against the best football players in the country. And so I don't need you to provide me an excuse. Let's get the job done. And that's still how I feel today. I will say this too. I take great pride in the fact that Duke is as great an academic institution as it is. Back whenever we were really struggling, you might have heard rumors of, well, they need to lax the academic requirements for athletes, or maybe Duke needs to play the Ivy League schools. Well, come on now. No, let's have the highest standards for academics and athletics, and let's achieve those standards. And that's what Duke is committed to, doing both of those. And I'm extremely proud to be a Duke football alum and a Duke graduate.
And I think, I think your point about you can succeed doing both, you can. I mean, you may not be always competing for a national title every year, but I don't want Duke to do the kind of recruiting things that some schools do that get them in trouble, right? Like, you think Baylor recently, for example. I don't want the program to go in that direction at all. I don't think anybody really does. I think that from the fans' perspective, we just want to win more than we lose, right? I mean,
absolutely. Yeah.
And right now, there's kind of a lot of fear with the athletic director change of going back to the bad era, the troubles. I don't think that that's going to happen. I think that there's going to continue to be a commitment to the football program and to the football program doing well, because I think it helps the school a great deal when you have, Ross Cockrell playing in the Super Bowl, right?
Right.
When you have Daniel Jones as a first-round pick, and you had last year, you had with the 49ers, Lake and Tomlinson, in the Super Bowl, right? So I think that's good for the brand as a whole. Now, I'm just kind of curious. I think we may have covered this already, but I would like your input on this. What was the biggest challenge you think that the football program faced when you were there from 97 to 2001? It could be, anything from recruiting, the coaching change and uncertainty with that, the changing in facilities for other programs. I mean, what was the biggest challenge that you all faced during your time at Duke?
Yeah, I can't cite sort of a biggest challenge, and as I said, I've thought about this for 20 years, and I keep coming back to our inability during that time to develop a culture of winning. I'm a high school math teacher, and so I think a lot about the culture that I develop in my classroom for students to learn. And culture is made up of so many little things, and so many big things. There's no doubt. But how do people talk to one another? Is there a quiet confidence in the ability of people in the program? Is there a confidence in the ability to produce the winning plays during the game? And I think that, again, for whatever reasons, and I'm being genuine when I say I can't say that there was one thing, because there wasn't. I believe that there were a lot of things that we maybe missed by just enough that we couldn't develop that winning culture during my time there. And I'll take some responsibility for that too as a player. I was a key part of Duke football during that time, and so I'm willing to own those records. I'm willing to own my performance. I'm willing to own all that. And when it's all said and done, I come out very proud of my years at Duke, despite not having won as many games as I would have hoped we did.
And I don't think you need to be obviously too hard on yourself. I mean, I look back on that period as the way that I described to you earlier. It was something that the program needed to go through so that a lesson could be learned about how things had changed. And your comment on culture, I always view culture as the rules that aren't written down. It's what's expected from everybody. And that takes a lot of time, and it takes a lot of patience. And I remember at the beginning of Cutcliffe's era of success, from 12 forward, there were some grumblings heading into that season about, well, gosh, he came in, he was 4-8, he was 5-7, and then we've got back-to-back 3-9 years. Maybe this isn't going to work out. Maybe his best years were with Coach Roof's players, for example. And I just said, well, let's be patient. Let's see what happens. Let's give him some more time. And I think one of the things that your time at Duke has taught me, and I apply this in things that I do in my career, and I try to do it as a parent, is sometimes you just need to be patient, right?
Right.
You don't need to overreact. You don't need to panic and do something just to do it. You just need to be patient. And I think that's something that is helpful for people in any aspect of their life. But let's talk about your favorite memory at Duke.
My favorite memory at Duke might be, and I don't know that I've given this a lot of thought. As we talked previously, you tend to think about the missed opportunity more than the achievement sometimes. I remember, as you ask that right now. Well, okay, so my favorite memory of Duke is the relationships I made with my teammates. Hands down, no doubt. 100%, that's the answer. But if you're looking for a specific moment, walking off the field with fellow receiver Kyle Moore on senior day in Wallace Wade Stadium, having endured the challenge of being a college student athlete at a university like Duke, having in my mind succeeded as a student athlete, and in a sense having finished that journey. I remember seeking out Kyle on the field after the game, and he and I became pretty close as receivers that last year. And I said, hey, I want to walk off this field with you. And we did. We walked off together.
Well, that's great. That's a great story. To transition a little bit, the way that I got in touch with you was I found some videos that you had posted on YouTube, and I was looking for those because of another interview that I hope to do soon. Uh, just a little teaser for the fans out there who are listening. And you had posted about 20 or so videos of some of your high school footage, but a lot of stuff from Duke, some mixtapes and everything, some games. Um, I think some of the coaches' shows from Sunday. Tell us how you ended up posting those on the internet.
Yeah, so when the pandemic hit last year and we were all locked down, I finally took the time to transfer my old VHS tapes from high school and college to digital. And initially, I've had this big box in my basement. It was in my parents' basement for the longest time. Then it moved to my basement for the longest time, and it was always in the way. And I thought I have to do something with these tapes before they go to waste, before they become so old that they don't actually work anymore. And I really just wanted to preserve the memories for me, but also for my kids, because I thought, I got two boys, so they'd be interested in me someday. I know my dad, he played high school sports and he played football at Bucknell. And I remember seeing his football cleats from when he played and thinking that was like the coolest thing ever, just his cleats. And so I'm thinking, I got to preserve these game tapes and my kids can watch them someday and see, who their dad was when he was young. And so that was my goal. So I bought a little device off of Amazon and I started transferring these VHS tapes. And you know what you find when you do this kind of thing is you watch every second of every game. Now, luckily, we were in a lockdown, and so I had some time on my hands. Yeah, it was so much fun to relive the high school and the college memories. And I found myself in the moment feeling the emotion, probably more emotion, because as a player, you're almost kind of immune to it when you're in the game because you've trained yourself to be focused. And as a 41-year-old man rewatching this, you get your stomachs in knots and you're watching this, and then again, my 9-year-old son Luke is a huge Duke football fan. He starts sitting down and watching these games with me. And I would even get up and walk away at points, and he would still be sitting there watching them. And my wife and I are like, "Where's Luke?" He's in the office watching one of my games. So it was they're fantastic memories, and I've gotten feedback, not feedback, but I've gotten comments from friends, teammates that saw them up there, and I've watched them. And so, yeah, I ended up putting them on YouTube because I thought, well, if I just put these into some hard drive, we're going to lose the hard drive and we're never going to find these. And I thought, where can I put them where they will last forever? And I came up with YouTube. So they're out there if people want to see them.
And the best thing about this is now you get to do an interview for Bull City coordinators. So, I mean, it's
absolutely, right? See?
No,
I've listened to a bunch of your interviews, and I've become a big fan. You do a very nice job, and I appreciate the analysis and the commitment to Duke as a fan. So thank you for that.
Well, I appreciate that, and I will say, there's a line, as a lawyer, I say plagiarism gets a bad rap. And there's a line that I stole from a politician in South Carolina when he was discussing a painful election that he lost. He said, "My memory of that time period comes back a lot like malaria." And when I started deciding I wanted to reach out to some players from your era, my first thought was, how am I going to do this? Because so many people have just kind of instantaneous negative reactions to this. But to the win-loss record from that time period, right? That's always like that. We don't want to go back to that. But as I started doing this, I started remembering, me and my dad would go watch games together on Raycom Sports, Jefferson Pilot Sports. We'd go watch on Saturdays at this pizza place back home, right? And I remember, Stallmeyer and Delamalore, that great linebacking core you had. And this was after your time, but I remember when I was living in Charleston, South Carolina at the time, listening to Duke Clemson on the radio, and our field goal kicker kicked like a 50-something yard field goal to just win right at the end of the game, and going to work the next day where I worked, and we worked at this sign company, right? And back then, they built signs for Blockbuster, a bunch of cash advance stores, Quiznos, some other places. Those were the big accounts. And the stores were identified internally by the client initials and then the store number. So if your team lost, you would often get an email, with some fake store number that would match up to the score. And I remember after that Clemson game, I sent an email to one of the fans, one of the coworkers who was a big fan, and it said AD for Advance America, 1613, and I sent it with high importance. And he opens it up, and it's a picture of the Duke kicker getting, carried off the field, And I just, when I started going back through this time period, I remembered, like you said, I wasn't happy about the win-loss record, but there's a lot of stuff that I do have good memories about, and there's no reason not to think about the good part of it, right? I mean, there's no reason to get locked down on the negativity, but I appreciate your comments on that, and as a fan, I enjoy being able to do this. This is a much more productive outlet than just complaining about what happened in a game. So people like you coming on and giving me this opportunity, I appreciate it very much. My wife probably appreciates it more because I'm not bothering her about it, So, but what I would like to do now is I'd like you to tell everybody who's listening what you're doing now, what you're up to, what's going on in your family life, what you mentioned you're a teacher, what you're doing as far as, just your spare time. Tell us what you're up to now.
Yeah, so as I said, I'm a high school math teacher back in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. I work at a great school district. I've been there. This is my 17th year, which is hard to believe. I'm married with two boys. Luke is 9 and Maddie is 7. And they are into their activities. The last few years, they've gotten into mostly baseball and soccer. But Luke really wants to play football. So far, we've told him we're going to stay out of football for now, as just a young kid. But he's a huge Duke football fan, as I said. And here's just a quick story. This year for Halloween, he comes to us. He said, "Hey, I know what I want to be for Halloween." I said, "What's that, buddy?" He said, "I want to be a Duke football player." I said, "Well, where are you going to get a Duke football uniform?" He said, "I'm going to wear your jersey and your helmet."
That's great.
So that's what he was. Yep. He got a pair of football pads, shoulder pads from whenever I coached here at high school football. And that's what he dressed up for. And it was funny because, we live in Pittsburgh and he's trick-or-treating. And one of the moms that was out with her kids says, "Oh, is he a Penn State football player?" And Luke turns around and says, "No, Duke."
I love it.
Yeah. So yeah, I'm a big family man. I love my family. I coach all my kids sports when I can. And recently, not recently, but back in, I guess, like 2005 or 6, I started to do triathlons, which is swimming, biking, and running. And I needed an outlet for that competitive drive, and something more than just coaching. And so I got into doing triathlons. And at first, it was just going to be a hobby. And then it became kind of a lifestyle. And in 2014, I said to my wife, I said, hey, I want to try to go to Kona for the Ironman World Championships. And she sort of gave me her blessing. I hired a coach, and for a full 12 months, I trained like I had never trained before. Get up early, swim. After work, go for a run. Get up early, bike. After work, go for a run. And it was probably the most challenging year of our marriage, because our lives kind of revolved around my workouts, which is insane to say right now, even as I look back. But I ended up, the Ironman World Championship, you have to actually qualify for it. You can't just sign up for it. And so I ended up qualifying at the Ironman Louisville. And then my wife and I went to Kona, Hawaii, and I did the Ironman World Championships in 2014. So triathlon is still a hobby for me, but it's much less of a focus now. And mostly because my kids are older and they're getting involved in their own stuff. And I don't want to be missing out on that stuff.
Well, that's interesting what you mentioned about it was a difficult year for your marriage, but I remember it may have been something like this with your wife investing in you doing that. Is I'm somewhat uncultured, but several years ago, a buddy of mine from law school got a chance to get married in Jackson Hole, Wyoming. And I didn't know what Jackson Hole was, but I come home and I say to my wife, I was like, hey, Jim's getting married. And she says, oh, that's fantastic. Where's Jim getting married? And I said, this place called Jackson Hole. And she goes, okay, I want to be clear. She just interrupts me. She said, I want to be clear with you. I know you've got a lot of cases. I know you take a lot of depositions and you're busy. You are not going to screw this up and prevent me from taking the kids and you to Jackson Hole. You are not ruining this vacation for us.
Oh, okay.
So I told the scheduling coordinators at my old firm, I said, okay, I'm under the penalty of death. Do not overlap anything in or around this wedding. So I imagine your wife may have had some similar motivation about, oh, you could go to Hawaii? Okay, yeah, we'll go through this process,
Yes,
for that.
Yes. The end result was, I guess, worth the enduring of my training. So yeah, we enjoyed Hawaii. It was a great time. So
that's excellent. That's excellent. And I like what you said about more than coaching, because I have to make amends to my wife for the last interview that I did with Ross Martin. He mentioned soccer. My wife got mad because I didn't bring this up, so I'll go ahead and do that now. You mentioned more than coaching. I never played soccer as a kid, but my son plays soccer. He's 12. He loves soccer. He's very good. And my wife played soccer when she was in high school and was very good. Okay. And so people say that I yell. I don't think that I yell. My voice just gets loudly authoritative. My wife is a little, she's a short, red-haired Irish woman who can't project her voice very well. So she wanted to coach our son's soccer team. That resulted, so that meant that I was also there. I was kind of the mouthpiece for her, the one who was barking out the orders, saying what needed to be done,
Sure.
So that resulted in, I have to bring this up so she won't be mad at me, the Goal Crushers, as we were called, 3 undefeated seasons. Our worst year, we had 1 tie. So I've mentioned that. I've satisfied that obligation. But I just want to say, because we've coached our daughter's soccer team too, who's 7, I really enjoy doing that. I enjoyed the instruction, the helping, the one-on-one time, the motivating. I don't know what your experience with that was, if you enjoyed that or not, or if it was just kind of, there were times where it was stressful, especially like you want to keep them winning and happy. But did you enjoy doing that?
Enjoy coaching my kids?
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. It is so much fun to be able to be with young kids and try to instill everything from, and enjoyment of a sport to the focus and the discipline of trying to get better. I love the youth sports stuff. We're fortunate enough to live in a community where we have some good youth programs and some people that really are dedicated to putting in their own time to make those programs really quality. So absolutely. And, I'm sure you felt this too as a parent. You reach an age, and I guess your kids reach an age where your life becomes more about them than it does about you. And that's kind of, I go back to like the triathlon thing. I was so dedicated with triathlon for many years. And then it became like I would leave to go on a long bike ride, a training ride, and I would be wanting to get home because I wanted to be with my kids and I wanted to be involved with their things. And so absolutely, I agree 100% with you.
Yeah, the thing that I liked most about coaching, and actually when I was in high school, I started helping coach with some YMCA basketball teams because I loved the instructional part of it. What I found most fulfilling as a coach was either, I enjoyed making the adjustments in game. Like I remember one year I suggested for a basketball team that we move a kid who was tall away from center and let him play point guard. And that worked. I loved little things like that. But I also liked, with a lot of the soccer players, because, with my size, I kind of was a natural goalie, for the team as we were practicing. I liked taking the kids and doing the one-on-one instruction the most.
Sure.
I mean, there was, working with them individually to try to get the most out of them. I found the most satisfying of all of that. I don't know what your experience was, but I really enjoyed that.
Yeah, no doubt. And that's, this is the same draw that led me to being a teacher. And to see individuals, young people, work and work and work, and then for that hard work to pay off, it really becomes addicting, and it's so gratifying. I've told people in the past, my paycheck is the biggest whenever I have a former student or a former player come back years later and just say, hey, Mr. E, I remember when you did this, and I just want you to know how much that impacted me. And you're like, wow, like that is awesome that I got to have that impact. And I hope it happens more than it doesn't. I don't know. I hope that I have a positive impact on my students and players.
And, my dad was a high school teacher for a long time till he retired. And my mom was an elementary school librarian until she retired. And I do think there's a lot of times where you won't even know that you had that positive impact. My buddy Tim, who I mentioned, that we up until recently would watch games together. Somebody moved in across the street from him who was a former student. And I was at a law firm where with one of his former students, and one of his former students' husbands worked at my law firm. She worked at another law firm in town and is now working, I think, in the Solicitor General's office here in Virginia. And, when they came back to Roanoke, she sought him out and said, how much he meant as a teacher. And I think those things, they'll take time, but they'll come around, and it's an amazing feeling, to have that.
Yeah, it is, no doubt.
Well, what else do you want to tell us about Duke football before I let you go? Is there anything else you want to say? This has gone on for a while. I don't want to take up too much of your time, but this has been one great conversation, at least for me. I've enjoyed listening to you. Is there anything else that you would like to tell us about Duke football?
Sure. I mean, I am one of the biggest Duke football fans now. My kids always ask, Dad, what's your favorite, NBA team? What's your favorite baseball team? What's your favorite? And I tell them, guys, I really only have one favorite team, and that's Duke football. and I watch them every chance I get. And just like you and your buddy try to choose the right beer to influence the outcome, I sit there thinking that somehow I'm affecting the game when I know that I'm not. And there are also times where if they happen to not be on TV, I'm thankful because I just get to relieve myself of that emotion of being hung on every play. So I continue to be a huge Duke football fan. I'm a big Coach Cutcliffe fan. I have not met him, but everything that I've heard about him is quality, and I hope that he continues to have success. I wish all the players that are currently there well, and I'm sure that they're working hard to get ready for next season. And I'll just finish off by saying that I really enjoyed this conversation, and go Duke.
Well, thanks a lot, Ben. It was great to have you on. I appreciate you taking time out of a Saturday to do this. For all of those who are listening out there, any former players, former coaches, former anybody associated with the program, send us an email, bullcitycoordinators@gmail.com. Happy to set up a time to speak with you, and we look forward to many good interviews in the future. Once again, this was Ben Erdeljac. If I pronounced that wrong, I apologize. But this was one great conversation. I enjoyed it, and we've got a few more that we're working on lining up, so stay tuned.